Hello everyone, and welcome back to the workbench for another locomotive build. Today we're going to be doing an Athearn Genesis SD45-2. This is a Conrail unit here in the quality scheme from the late 90s. This particular unit is the 6659. Here you guys are seeing some finished photos of it. Let's go ahead and let's dive into this model here. Now this is an Athearn Genesis, so detail-wise, right out of the box, it's pretty solid. Not going to need a lot of work, but you know, there is a bit to do here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to pull our couplers out right now. As a lot of you know, these come from the factory with these McHenry plastic couplers, and we won't need those where we're going, so we'll upgrade to KDs. So when I disassemble a locomotive like this, I always like to try to kind of keep the parts together and try to keep everything together here. So for starters here, we're pulling these coupler boxes out, and you guys will kind of notice here on screen, you'll see me kind of take and put the two pieces of the coupler box together, and then I try to put the coupler screw back to through it as well, and then I place it in a bag for storage. That way it keeps all that stuff together. Now we're going to go ahead and we're fiddling with our fuel tank here, and as you guys can tell, I'm trying to wiggle it off here, and I'm trying to figure out why won't this come off of here. And for some odd reason here, I decided to go ahead and put the fuel tank back on and instead go after these two screws here that hold the frame to the shell. Athearn hides these here and kind of by the trucks. You really kind of got to look for them. They can be a bit of a pain to get to. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get those out and get our shell off here first, as opposed to trying to get our fuel tank off. I had thought I needed to take the fuel tank off to get to those truck screws, but on this particular model we didn't have to do that here. So we got our shell, kind of look around a little bit in there, you kind of see things. Now the first kind of thing we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove this DCC ready board here, because we're not going to need that where we're going. Remove the wires from the motor and the wires from each truck so we can go ahead and get these two pieces separate and continue on with our disassembly process here. So with this frame, I'm going to end up doing some modification work. One of the first things I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove these weights from the front. The reason I like to remove the front weight particularly is because I always get concerned with wires getting pitched, like going to ditch lights and stuff, and a lot of these frames and weights are designed to fit very tight in the shell. So even though I don't need that space later on, I'll go ahead and remove that weight there. As you can see there, I'm kind of eyeballing to see if our speaker would just fit up there in the front and I could leave this weight in the back, and unfortunately that's not going to work out. So we're going to end up having to remove this giant weight deal here in the back. As you can see, this was designed for the old round speakers that nobody really uses anymore that I know of. Everybody's kind of went to the more cube style speakers. So we're also going to check to see will our keep alive fit in there, you know, because why not take a look in there, see if that'll fit. Is it going to fit? I don't know. I don't think so, Tim. I don't think that's going to work there. So we'll go ahead and it's always good to just check stuff like that just to see. But in this case, we're not going to end up using that rear weight. We'll end up replacing that with like a styrene deal for mounting our speaker on top of. But as far as taking these weights out, it's kind of a look at it and see where the screws go and kind of go from there. And as you guys can see, you get your screws out and things still want to stick in there just because of how they sit. But once you get one piece out, the other piece will pop right out and boom, we got that weight off of there. And you can see I'm kind of screwing that back together, try to keep it together. And now I'm going to go ahead and remove our trucks here, because I'm going to end up disassembling this entire motor and drive assembly here to do some milling work on the front of the frame. To get these trucks off, you got to kind of pull apart on the little pieces here on the front. You guys can kind of see that there. I'm kind of like pulling them apart from one side or another, and then usually you can kind of wiggle that and it'll get the worm gear to pop up out and apart. And then obviously once you get that worm gear and everything off, you can go ahead and lift your frame right off the trucks. Now that we have all that apart, we can go ahead and take our fuel tank off here, as you can see. And so we don't lose our screw, we'll put a piece of tape on the underside there. And last but not least, we got to take our motor out, which there's 4 little screws there that we're going to remove. And hopefully not drop into the carpet abyss here. So just pop them out of there. And in order to not lose those screws, I always recommend taking and just threading them back in. You don't have to, thread them all the way in or anything. Just get a couple turns on them just to keep them from disappearing off into nowhere. So put those away. And now we'll be ready to take and mill the front of our frame down. I'll just take a Dremel, and what you can see right now is I'm taking and I'm marking on the front about where I want to cut the frame down with the Dremel. I don't have a good way to film that, so that's going to be cut out, but you guys will see what the frame will look like afterwards there. And now we're going to go ahead and start the disassembly on our body shell here. And we got to get our cab off here to do some of the lighting work. As you can see, I just broke that because, that's the way she goes. But with these cabs, a lot of times, you got to kind of pry up from the sides a little bit. You just got to be kind of careful. And also don't panic when you break something off, like what you guys see me do there. That's what glue's for. It'll be fine. And once we get our cab off, obviously you guys tell, we pull our tape out and our lights out from the inside there. Now, this piece is going to come back, and we'll visit this again later. Right now, you're going to see me take some of the plasti weld here, and right now in my head, I'm thinking I fixed that, but you guys will find out later that that's not quite what happened there. I didn't get enough glue on that. So next, we're going to take our number board deals off here in the front. Just use a knife there and just get under the edge of it very easily. And they'll normally pop up. Sometimes you got to kind of fiddle with them. Just be careful. You can kind of damage the shell and the number board kind of easily there. So our next piece of the puzzle here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint the sides of the wheels on the trucks. Now, normally you would do all your painting for truck wheels and all that stuff. Normally you do that during the weathering process. But whenever I'm doing a locomotive build like this and I have the entire unit disassembled, I always try to do things like painting the wheels and such, because it's a lot easier to do these wheels when the truck can free turn on its own. The wheels can spin in a complete circle, versus later on when you're having to paint one side and then put the locomotive to track power so the wheels will rotate and get the other side. So that's kind of the reason I do this now. And also, this I always try to do stuff like this when I have time to let the paint dry before I'm going to do anything else with the truck anyway. So this felt like a good point to go ahead and do that here. So just get it around the edges. You just got to be careful you don't go too far up. You don't want to get the paint all the way up in the center. Next thing here, we're going to start drilling out and making all of our holes for our various lighting modifications we're doing here. Here you can see I'm using a thumbtack. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to point right in the center of those class light, marker light holes there, or the little bubble on the top of it that's supposed to be the class light and marker light. And I make that little dot with the thumbtack first, and then I come in with my drill here. And I'm really going to kind of take my time here, because I want to try and do my best to get that drill bit hole here right in the center. As you guys tell, I'm starting with a very small drill bit, and then I'll go to a larger one. But it's very, very important to try and get that that hole centered in the circle there. That way your lights are all kind of, that way the lights are centered in there, so they're not offset and you don't end up with a light that looks goofy. So we start off with a smaller bit, and now we're going to go to a bigger bit. That smaller bit just gives us a pilot hole, so when we go in with the bigger bit, we can get this hole perfect. As you guys can see here, we're just nice and easy, taking our time, not rushing. Just going to go ahead and work on that just a little bit there. And the kind of trick to this here is you need to make the hole big enough that the LED will fit in it later, but you don't want to make it so big that it's going to look goofy when you put a lens on it. So you got to kind of walk that line there. Usually with these, if you kind of stay within that little silver painted area, you'll be pretty good. Maybe go a hair bigger than that when you're working on that. See that great zoom in I got going on there? Me trying to get that with the thumbtack. I mean, just really trying to get that there. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to repeat that same process we did on the front here on the back. Again with our smaller drill bit first, and then we'll go over to our bigger drill bit. So the reason we're doing this is because we're going to have lit marker lights on this unit when it's all said and done, and obviously these units from the factory don't come with that, so we have to drill our own holes and make our own way with this here. So kind of go ahead and work our drill bit through there. And again, same process here. We've already drilled our pilot hole and we're going in there. Now for the big mamma jamma here, I guess you'd say. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do our number boards. And here's kind of the biggest challenge of doing these, really any Athearn unit up until these recent Genesis 2.0 ones, is all of these number boards are all just printed on there. They're, you know, cast into the body and then they're printed. It's like a decal or pad printing or whatever you want to call it there. And so there's no actual housing like on the front where you can mount an LED. So in order to have a lit number board on a unit like this, we actually have to make our own hole in the shell for it. And the easiest way I've found to do that is to take and basically drill it out. I'll take a big size drill bit, one that's about a little bit smaller than the actual width of the number board itself, and what I'll do is I'll drill either 3 or 4 holes in the side, and I'll kind of work the drill bit around as what you guys are seeing, and then I'll come back with my knife here, and we'll just go ahead and we'll take and kind of connect those holes, and we'll slowly kind of chisel away at the edges and kind of straighten out from those drill bit holes. And as you guys can see, it's a bit crude, it's a bit rough, but it's the only way that I know of that you're going to get a lighted number board on a Genesis, one of these older Genesis units. So it's not perfect by any means, and if anybody's got better ideas out there, I'm always open to suggestions on it. But this is just the best way I've found to do it, is you just got to kind of drill it out and then slice it open a little bit at a time, just being very careful. At the end of the day, the thing you have to remember when you're doing something like this is that even if your edges aren't like completely perfect or whatever have you, it's not a perfect rounded corner and stuff, the big picture of it's going to be when you put the decals on the number board later, you're not going to see if the edges aren't exactly perfect. And even still, see, there you guys go, there's a little shot out there. They're not perfect, but they're holes through the shell that we will be able to put light in, and will be a lighted number board. But you won't really notice if those edges aren't perfect and stuff when the model's all said and done. So now we gotta go ahead and we gotta clean up some of the little like flashing kind of pieces that came off on the inside from when we drilled our holes. We gotta do that in the front and back there, as you guys tell. Now the kind of key to doing all of our separate lighting, our number boards and everything, is now we have all our holes to put our lights in. Now we need something to keep the LEDs inside the shell, that'll keep them from going through and falling in and out and all that. I know some people like to use bulbs and like mount them and such. I prefer just, this has been kind of what I've went with for the last few years now, is I'll take a piece of sheet styrene like you guys are seeing here and some of the plasti weld, and I'm going to take that sheet styrene, I'm going to put it in there, and usually, like you guys are seeing right now, I don't put enough of the plasti weld in there and it falls out. And, you know, it's just kind of the way she goes. You always end up kind of fighting with things a little bit. But we're going to put that in there. And what that sheet of styrene is going to do there is that's actually going to be our backing for our rear light, our number board, and our marker light. So it's very important to get that stuck in there really well. You guys kind of see me put that in there, and I'll put some plasti weld on it, and I'll put some more. And I just don't want that piece to come out at all, and you guys will kind of find that if you do this on your own, if you don't put enough of that glue in there when you go to drill the holes through to run the wires for the LEDs, if you didn't put enough of the plasti weld in there, it'll come out pretty easily. So we're going to be very, very generous with our plasti weld, and then we're also going to come here from the outside in the number board area, as you guys can tell here. We're just going to give just a touch of that stuff in there, because that'll really hold it in there well. Only with the number boards, because the marker light holes are a little bit too small to try and get that plasti weld brush down in there. So I just do that with the number boards, and that seems to serve me just fine as far as getting that in there. So now we got to go ahead and we also have to do our number board, or our marker lights here on the front. We also have to do as well. As you can see, I just cut a pretty generous sized piece of styrene. I'm not gonna, try to cut a small piece, or I just put a piece in there. You can use a scrap piece, anything that's gonna cover that hole and give you some surface area around it to also hold that piece down in there. So now we're going to get into the real fun here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to open up our cab doors here. And in order to do this, we actually have to remove the cab doors from our cab. And as part of that, you got to go ahead and you got to pull the windshield wipers and the window out. And as you guys can see there, I was trying to pull that wiper out, and Athearn actually put a little bit too much glue on there, so it wouldn't come out. So just cut it off. I mean, it's going to be scrap anyway. What are you going to do? Our doors from KV models actually have wiper blades anyway, so it's not really a big concern to keep those if they're going to give me trouble like they are right here. I'll just rip them out. It's not a big deal. So to open these cab doors, the way I kind of attack this here is I go in with a knife here, like you guys are seeing, and on the shell itself you have like the casting line of the door, the outline of it, and I just take and slice right along that edge, and I have a very sharp blade here, kind of a fresher one, and I'm just going right down that line over and over and over again. I'm not pressing super hard, but I'm just kind of continuing to score this over and over and over again. This is one of those parts where you can kind of, if you rush too much, you will end up kind of goofing up a little bit, and it's going to give you more trouble than it's worth. But if you take your time and you just keep going over and over and over, it's going to continue to score that line a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, and then when we go to break the door out of the cab, it'll come apart a lot easier. So there you guys are seeing just over and over and over again. This is going to be kind of similar to how we did the number boards in the back, where it's going to be a little bit crude and a little bit rough, but we'll come in and we'll clean it up with a knife, and it'll look nice, and it'll look good when it's all said and done. So once you got it scored pretty good, I like to take these pliers here, and again, like I said, a bit crude, but rather than trying to cut all the way through via the scoring, I like to kind of take the pliers and just kind of work at the door a little bit and try to break it in half, and then come in with the knife and kind of go ahead and try and do my slices here and try to slice from the top down a little bit. As you can see, again, we'll take our knife and we'll just kind of cut right there along that edge, and then boom, we got the bottom part of the door out. So we'll come back in and we'll just kind of clean up that edge a little bit. Again, I'm not looking for it to be, absolutely perfect. I mean, I just want it to be cleaned up and looking like the door's open, I mean? So then we come in, we're going to take that piece out at the top that we scored. This top part up here is probably the trickiest part of the whole thing, to be honest with y'all, is getting this top part of the door out, this angled section. It could be a real booger to get out of there. You got to kind of take and pick at it a little bit, and you score at it a little bit, and you just kind of keep working at it with the knife. And just got to keep messing with it, and eventually you'll get it. It just takes a little bit of time to get that door cut out of there like that. But again, you got to be a little bit crude at first, and then you come back and you clean it up a little bit. That's all it takes. Just a little bit of time of cleanup there. As you can see, it's really fighting with me here. But once that's all cleaned up here, we'll move over to our rear door and work on that and start ripping that out there. But there you guys go. Got that all kind of cleaned up there. Now, what we're going to go ahead and do here is we're going to take and we got our doors cut out. I believe I lost the footage for the rear door, so we won't see that today. But if you look inside of our number board housing here, this isn't really the best angle to do that. With these Athearn models, the way their cabs are assembled, the headlight doesn't go all the way through to the inside of the shell. So what I need to do here, and what you guys are kind of trying to see here, is I need to block off that center section with the headlight in it to prevent light bleed from our marker lights. And the only way I've found to do that decently is to take pieces of styrene, like what you guys are seeing here, and place them in there and kind of cover that up so that way the light can't through. Now, trying to get that piece in there is an absolute pain in the rear end, is what you guys are seeing. But again, it's kind of one of those necessary evils, because if your LEDs go slide too far back, you'll end up with lights in the wrong place and stuff. So I just put those pieces in there just to try to seal that off a little bit. We're also going to go ahead and we're going to put our piece here on the back of our headlight housing to hold our LEDs in later. There, you guys can see that. Just going to go ahead and stick that guy in there like so. And we'll go ahead and set our body and all that aside for the time being. And we're going to start the reassembly process here on our motor and drive now. And as I mentioned earlier, I did do some milling on the front weight of this unit. I fortunately didn't get any on video. It's kind of hard to film that stuff in the garage. The lighting's really not good. And honestly, it's just me with a Dremel just cutting a chunk off the front of the thing. But the reason I do that again is to give me some breathing room up in the front for my lights, for my ditch lights and my marker lights, so I don't have to worry about the wires getting pinched. Those wires are so thin; they're like the size of a hair. You know, they're so thin, and if you're not careful, you can pinch them and have them break. So I went ahead and I trimmed that down a little bit, and now that that's completed, we're going ahead and we're putting our motor and drive back together here. So we got to put our 4 screws back in here. I always like to get all 4 started and then torque them down and tighten them down. I don't, when I'm putting these in, I don't just tighten them down all the way and any of that. I kind of start off with one and then torque them in a different place. So next we're going to do a little detail work here on our trucks, and we're actually going to add a brake pipe line here going from one brake cylinder to another. As detailed as these Genesis units are, they don't have this detail, which is kind of a bummer, but very simple to add with some bronze wire. So as you can see, drilled out the ends of the brake cylinders, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to bend our brake line here. And as you guys can tell, I tried to do it with the drill bit there, and that's not quite what I'm looking for. It's a little bit too small, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to go with this guy here and see how that works and see whether that's going to be about the right angle and right bend I'm looking for here. So we'll go ahead and give that a shot. We'll just cut it down a little bit because we need enough that it'll go into that brake cylinder, but we don't want that piece to be sticking out way out of the end of it either. We just want it to be sticking out a little bit. So go ahead and get that started, and then we take and kind of measure by eye, and then we bend the opposite end, as you guys can tell there. And we'll cut that guy down too. And we'll go ahead and we'll do a quick test fit here and see how that fits up on there. Kind of feed it into one end, pull it forward, slide the other end in. Everything looks pretty decent there. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna bend that just a touch more. And go ahead and get her right on up and on there. So we gotta do this with all the sides of the trucks. We'll go ahead and we're going to get a little CA glue out here. That's some of my hobby bond, the thick type, as you guys can tell. That's what I'm going with here. So this is just the stuff I get on eBay for cheap. That's why I use it. And we'll go ahead and we'll put that on there. Just a little bit around like the end of the brake cylinder where that line goes in there. You don't have to get too carried away with that. Just a touch. You don't have to get too much on there. You could also take and dip the ends of the wire line in there and go with that route as well. That would work just as well. Now, as you guys can see here, I swapped tools and techniques here. We decided to go with one of these micro brushes. I get those for weathering. That actually ended up seeming to be about the right width to be used for a bending jig for this. So kind of take it down there, and then we could use that brush to kind of bend around and get our end about right. But again, just bending it around, we'll cut it, we'll fit it, and then we'll put a little glue on it. But this is one of those things I kind of started doing more recently. Within like the last 2 years, I started adding these wires to locomotives that didn't have them. Specifically these Genesis models, a lot of the ready-to-roll models as well. It's one of those things that, I don't know about you guys, it's one of those details that if you don't notice it and you don't know what's missing, you don't really see it. It doesn't really bother you, you don't see it. But it's also that one of those things that, like, once you realize it's not there, at least for me, it makes me crazy, because it's like, wow, oh, no, I feel like it's missing. You know, so when I'm doing a build like this, if I'm already ripping into everything, I'm putting all this time and effort in, I mean, what's an extra 20 minutes to bend a few wires and glue them on? You know, drill a couple holes. I mean, that's not really that much work for something that I think really helps to bring a model to life and really can add just another layer of, you know, detail to something. So there you have it. There those are on there. So get those on. Now we gotta go ahead and we're gonna go ahead and reinstall them in the motor and drive frame here. Very important here when you're putting this back together. You do have the truck with the speed recorder cable goes on the front, and the one that doesn't goes on the rear. Always important to keep track of that. And as you guys can tell, you just put your wires up and through the center hole there. Get the truck to drop back down on its pin there, and then we have to reinstall our drive shaft and worm gear here. And of course, Athearn has those little square deals on the end of the worm gear. I don't know why they have to be square, but I have to say they just make me crazy trying to get them to drop back down in there. Makes me nuts every single time trying to get those to drop back down. So get those back on there, and then we put our cover back on. Now next, as you see here, we got our Loksound decoder here that's going to go on. This V5. This is one of the like direct fancy Keep Alives. Was a 58-921 or 59? I don't know. It was just on the screen. I already forgot. So what we have to do next here is we have to actually build our little platform deal here on the back that I'm going to mount my speaker on. And since we took out the weight before, we need to rebuild something here in the back to put this on. So for what I'm doing here, I'm going to take some thick styrene here, some thick sheet styrene, and we're going to cut this down. As you guys can see, I kind of just took it and I held it up and just kind of made myself some marks, and I'm going to cut a line of it right off, and then that's going to give us our piece right there. So usually what I try to do is I try to mount right off of, if there's like a weight piece on the back, like what's right underneath my pen, I usually try to mount right off the top of that. But I noticed on this model that that piece sits quite a bit higher above the top, like the top of the worm gear and all that. So I decided instead that what I was going to do is I'm actually going to mount it a little bit below that. I'm actually going to build the supports to go under it here, so that way it'll sit a little bit lower and I could get a bigger speaker enclosure in there. Because the bigger speaker enclosure you could put in a model, the better your sound quality is generally going to be. So I elected in this case to go ahead and build that. And as you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm just taking and kind of holding these little pieces of the sheet styrene I'm going to use here for supports. I just hold them up in place, make a little mark with my pen, and then I cut them down. And kind of the trick to doing this is, once you get one that's about the right size that you want, use that one as a template for the other 4 or 3, whatever you need, depending on how you're going to end up building it here. But as you can see, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start cutting our next one. I just use a chisel blade just to cut these, because, I mean, trying to do it with scissors, you always end up with a kind of curved line and stuff. So I'll use a chisel blade here and just kind of use that first piece I cut as a template, and we'll just cut out 4 more of them, because we'll need 4 for this build that we're doing here. And again, if one's a little wider than the other one, it's no big deal. You know, I mean, the big issue with these is you want to make sure they're all the same height. That's kind of the more important matter than if one's wider than the other one. There's some more of that good old CA glue, as you can see, just getting all over the place. So we'll go ahead, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to dip one end in our CA glue, and we're going to take and we're going to try and glue it to the frame. Now you have to be kind of careful here, because you got to make sure that wherever you end up gluing these supports at, it's not going to interfere with the truck. That's what you kind of see me doing here, because initially I thought, oh, I'll just put it right down here on this thin edge spot down here on the end. That'll be perfect. And when you pivot the truck, it hits on it. So that ain't going to work. So what we end up doing here is we end up mounting it a little bit farther down, which isn't ideal. I generally would like to have it more towards the end, over where the trucks, the tower gear and the worm gear and all that stuff's at. But if it's going to interfere with the truck being able to swing freely, it's just not going to work. And the key with doing these is I like to have them as straight up and down as possible, and maybe have a slight like inward lean in towards the drive shaft. And the reason for that is you got to be kind of careful, because if they start to lean outward, you can have them catch on the inside of the frame, or on the inside of the shell when you go to put it on, and the shell will end up breaking this. So as you can see, we kind of let them sit there and we'll let them dry. Now, while they're drying, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put together our speaker enclosures. Any of you that have seen some of my more recent stuff, in the future, I'm going to be going with the speakers from Scale Sound Systems going forward. But this model was built back in November-ish, November, December. I think's when I wrapped this up. So I was still using my ESU Cube speaker deals back then. And kind of just figured, you know what, we'll go ahead and show how I used to build these speaker enclosures. I would take 2 sets of the Sugar Cube speakers from ESU, and I would basically make like a 3-pack kind of thing going on here with 2 speakers. So you would have a speaker on each end, and then the center spot would be empty. So in order to do that, though, you got to kind of cut some of these parts apart to make this big center enclosure. So as you guys can see here, we're kind of cutting those, kind of laying it out a little bit there, so that way the sound can kind of flow from either side into that center side and make for that larger enclosure. I had a lot of luck with doing this way, but the reality of it is, just building these anymore, it's just not really worth the money too, I guess you'd say, because I could get a Scale Sound speaker for pretty much the same price, if not a little bit cheaper, and I don't have to do all this here where you guys are watching, where I'm going to cut the speaker enclosure custom and everything every single time. So when it's all said and done, going forward, I'll be using the Scale Sound enclosures with everything. But there you guys just kind of get a little see like the whole art of the speaker enclosure there a little bit, just kind of putting that deal together. But if you still wanted to do it this way, there ain't anything wrong with that either. So you got to put all those pieces on there, and then you use a bunch of that plastic welder on it. Just soak the sides of it, and just soak the whole thing together. I use that plastic weld for this. So as you see, there we go. Got it all assembled. Now we just go ahead and we just start coating it and that stuff to really hold it together well. Now next, we're going to get out our canopy glue here from Zap. It's good stuff. I like this stuff. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to put that down there. I use the canopy glue to secure the speaker to the enclosure because it doesn't leave a residue like CA glue does. I'm sure a lot of you out there that use CA glue or even super glue, you'll notice you'll get like a whitish residue around everything when it's dry. So with something like a speaker, I prefer to go with the canopy glue because it doesn't do that. It actually dries clear, and it doesn't have any goofy residues or anything. So now up here, we're getting to the point where CR Steve experiments here, and we're going to start hooking up some of our wires up here in the front. As you guys can see in the back there, we have our piece for our speaker mount in the back's already set on there. I apparently lost that footage as well. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to start doing our wiring here, or at least the base wiring. We're going to go ahead and start putting our trucks. We're going to start doing some of our base wiring anyway. We're going to put our truck wires in first, because all this wiring can be very confusing if you don't break it down into its separate parts here. So we're starting off and we're doing our truck wires first. We're starting off with the front truck, and then we'll do the motor and the rear truck as well. But if you break it down, this wiring stuff's really not all that complicated. You have a left truck and a left side and a right side for the trucks, and front and back, and then you have your motors, which is positive and negative. So it's pretty simple here. But as you can see, I'm trying to kind of figure out a way to get the wires to stick in the front, and I used a little bit of electrical tape. That's going to end up getting boogered up later. But we'll go ahead and we're going to throw a little solder down here on our board, just a touch. And now we have to go ahead and connect our motor wires, which just barely reach, because I don't know why it always ends up being like that, but motor wires are always just a little bit too short. They're either way short or they're way long. And in this case, they just barely reached over to connect. But get those on there. And as you guys can tell, we also have to do our rear wire trucks. You can see there I am getting happy with the electrical tape again. Just trying to keep them wires from moving around up in the front. But as you can see, I kind of feed the wire up through that little mount we did in the rear. Now you always kind of want to, eyeball your measurement here for your truck wire, and you guys are about to see I did this one just a touch too short, and it's gonna come back to bite me here in a minute. So you gotta be careful. Always go a little bit longer than you think you need. In this case, I didn't pull the wire far enough. I thought I had where I needed to, and I didn't. And as you guys tell there, it doesn't reach. So what are we gonna do? Well, we're gonna very carefully take our tweezers and hold our wire, or at least try to, so that we can solder it into place. Now you can see it still swings, still pivots just fine, but you gotta be careful when you use your tweezers like that to hold a wire, because when that wire gets hot from the soldering iron, it can and will burn, like go through to the tweezers and like melt the insulation. So now we're going to go ahead and, last but not least, for our motor and drive assembly, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our speaker on. As you can see, got some more of my favorite plastic welder to hold our speaker in place. And boom, that's on there. And we'll go ahead and we'll run our wires to our speakers next. I'll go ahead and throw a little solder at the mounts there, or the wire connecting points there. We'll go ahead and just throw a little bit of those. And to where they go on the board itself, right there. And next we're going to go ahead and we're going to start using some wire here. Now for some reason I got that yellow wire out and I ended up not using it. What I ended up using was actually the old bulb light wiring from the shell. I just took that, and what I like to do is I like to solder the wire a little bit, and then I'll cut it past that. That'll help keep those two wires together, because the way we're going to do these speakers is you have two outputs on your board, like a positive and a negative, and then your speakers each have a positive and negative. So one place on the board has to go to two places, so we need two wires. It's parallel wiring is what that's technically called, I believe. So we'll just go ahead and doing that. Go ahead, and so we're going from the positive on the board to the positive on each speaker, and the negative on the board to the negative on each speaker. It's basically the simplest way I could put it. So go ahead, and we're actually starting off with our farther away spot here on the board, or on the speakers itself. Here we're kind of going with the farther one first, and again you just kind of solder the end of the wire a little bit, and then you kind of pick that insulation off, and then you could actually solder the actual wire itself. That's kind of the trick to doing all this wiring, is just kind of making sure you burn that insulation off and get all that off of there. As you guys can see, again, before I try to cut that end with the bulb off, I kind of heat it up a little bit and kind of melt those wires together to keep them together before I cut it. And now you guys can see I'm kind of trying to work that insulation off. The big issue with these wires from the bulbs from the factory is trying to melt the insulation on them can be a bit of a pain. It kind of wants to really shrivel up the insulation way farther than you need, and that could cause an issue. So you just got to take your time and just do a little bit here and a little bit there. Just kind of keep working at it. So really, and then too, the big thing you gotta watch is to make sure you're very careful with the actual soldering to the speaker itself, because you can very easily heat up those little metal tabs and they'll pop loose. So just take your time, guys, with that stuff. So our motor and drive deal is all good to go there. So we're gonna go ahead and get some of the final work done here on our shell. As you guys can see here, we're going ahead and we're kind of placing our ditch lights here. And I'm using the ditch light castings from Details West. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking and kind of holding it up in the spot I want here. And what I do is I dip the end of the little pin that will go into the shell in a little bit of red paint. And then I kind of hold it up in the spot, and I use that little pin to go ahead and make my mark on there to drill with. And as you can see, I fumbled the shell there, got a little paint on the handrail I had to wipe off. But anywho here, so we'll go ahead and we're going to hold that up there, and we're going to touch it. And as you can see, it gives me a little guide where I have to drill those holes at to mount the ditch lights. So just going ahead and got my drill bit here, just kind of drilling away. Just got to try and get it as close to perfect as I can. This is one of those things where you got to really kind of be careful with it, because it's kind of noticeable when your ditch lights are a little lopsided or one's a little bit off of the other one. So take your time, drill those holes out, and then I always like to go ahead and do a little test fit here and just kind of see what I got going on. As you guys kind of tell there, that ditch light housing wasn't wanting to sit flat. So what I'm doing here is I'm trimming. There's a little piece along the edge that kind of uses to for the mount itself there. I had to cut that off so that way it's not interfering with the coupler cut bar, because that's the way the ditch light's kind of lined up on this unit. So now as far as getting the ditch light placement right and all that, I'll use prototype photos. In the event of these Conrail units like this, it can be kind of difficult to find a definitive picture from, 97, 98, 99. A lot of units there's pictures of in that time frame, but sometimes you don't have those, so I'll use something from the early 2000s in NS or CSX, because they, for the most part, left the ditch lights in the same place. Now, very important here also, you guys can see me drilling other holes. Those were for the those will be the ones that the wires for the LEDs go through, and for those I just drill them kind of close to where I actually put the hole for the ditch light housing to mount. So now we've got we're going to start putting some wires in this sucker here. We have our 402 LEDs, the warm white ones. We're just going to take them, we're going to feed those through our shell here. We're going to start off with the headlight. I always like to kind of start off with the highest mounted light and work my way down. So here we're starting off with the headlight, and then we'll do the number boards. Now what I'll do is I'll get both of these headlight LEDs put in through the shell, and then I'll tape them down in place and kind of keep them held together. And then I'll also take another piece of tape and put the ends of all the wires together and tape them together, and then I'll label them so that way I know exactly what these are later. There you can see some of that fancy golden tape there. Go ahead and get that put in there to hold those down nice and good. Never be afraid to use too much tape. Always good to keep your wiring nice and neat and tidy. And as you guys can see, I'm kind of twisting them together there, the wires together. And I'll go ahead and get a piece of tape here, and we'll put that on the end, and then like I said, we'll label them. I always just try to use 2 letters. In this case it'll be front light, which will be FL, so that way later on when I go to do all the actual wiring up here, I know what all these LED wires are and where they go to and what they're for. Now I didn't mention it yet here, but as far as what LEDs I use, I don't have a specific brand. To be honest with you guys, I just go on Amazon and I look up SMD LED, and then look for warm white ones. I use I believe it's 402s, the smaller size ones are what I'm using here. And basically I just buy them on there because you could get them for right around, well, I can't remember exact dollar amount, but you can get a bulk pack of them for pretty cheap. So that's what I always do. You just got to be careful. Some of the warm white ones will actually have more of a bluish tint to them, which it's kind of a bummer. But at the end of the day, I'm not skilled enough to solder the leads onto the end of LEDs myself and do all that jazz. So I just get the cheap ones off of Amazon, and then if I break one or something, or a wire comes off, I'm out 25 cents or whatever, so it's no big deal. Yeah, so I don't have a specific brand. The main thing I look for is, you guys will notice here, these particular ones we're using have a red and blue lead wire, so I kind of stick with those when I'm ordering those. Now, here we're going to run into a bit of a problem here, as you guys can see with the little thing I got up on the screen. I've been having some issues with my GoPro, and for some reason I lost all of the footage of me putting the rest of the wiring in the shell, the rest of the lights. So unfortunately we're not going to be able to see that. We're going to end up jumping right to the actual wiring, but it's the same process, just with the number boards and the marker lights, the front and back, all that stuff. Now you can see we got our ditch lights mounted, and like I said, unfortunately that footage is corrupted or something. I don't know what happened, but either way, you guys kind of got the point of it from doing those front number boards, exactly how we do all that. Now we're kind of rejoining things here. We got our ditch lights mounted in the front here, but I still need to secure all the wiring for those. So as you can see, we have to feed it through the actual cab area there. Athearn has this little area in the center of the cab where you could feed wires through, going from your ditch lights and from your nose lights and all that through the cab, and kind of keep them hidden a little bit. So that's what we're doing here. The other thing I'm kind of trying to do here is I'm trying to keep all this wiring nice and neat in the front, because 99% of the time, I'm going to tell you guys this, if you're going to have a problem with wiring on LEDs, The majority of the time, it's probably going to be ditch lights, or if you're doing step lights or something like that, where you have to kind of sneak the wires between the shell and the frame. That can always, you'll end up with a pinch point, and that can cause trouble. So always worth taking a little bit extra time and trying to keep that wiring neat. And it's also worthwhile, when need be, if you can, to go ahead and modify your frame a little bit there as well. Now you can see I'm gluing a seat I broke off at some point here, because, you know, I'd like you guys to all think I'm perfect, but I'm far from it. I'm just, you know, I kind of go with the way of if it breaks off, that's what they made super glue for, and we could always glue stuff back on later. So just got to take things as they go. Now you can see we fed our wires through from the cab into our shell. Now we're going to put our cab back in place here. See, going ahead and getting that guy to sit on there. You can see all of our wirings through there. It's not all messy. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to get the number board lights to go back in there, the LEDs. I'm also putting the handrails back on there, at least the ones that are still on the shell, as well as our one that fell off earlier on in this video. I'm going to get them handrails on there, that way it kind of also help hold the shell in place. Now we got all that wiring coming in to our shell there from the front and everything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my tweezers there to kind of get all that together, and I'm going to get out some more of my favorite yellow tape here and utilize that to hold all that wiring down. Really, really important, if you can, guys. You want to keep all of your wiring as neat and orderly as possible when it comes to this stuff. You want to keep all that stuff taped down and secured. For one, because if you don't have that wiring secured, you run into issues with your LEDs wanting to pop out of the shell and like pop through, because the wire can move freely, and you could run into that issue. Also, you really got to do it mainly to keep that wiring all so it can't get pinched in the shell when you go to put the shell back on later. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start wiring all of our LEDs to our shell here. As you can see, we're starting off with our front light here, and I just kind of held it over there, kind of eyeballed it and cut the wires. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our two blue wires here, and what we're going to do is we're going to solder the end of them here. And what we're doing here is I'm trying to burn off that insulation and then get some solder on the actual wire itself here. As you can tell, my soldering iron's a little bit dirty, but that's fine. You know, you can wipe that off and worry about that later. But as you guys can see, it'll be very obvious to you when you really get through that insulation. Because when you're holding that wire with your fingers, you'll feel that heat from the iron go through very, very quickly. That's why you'll see me kind of touch it and hold it there very, very quick for a short period of time, because if you hold that too long, you'll feel that heat. So the next thing we're going to do, once we get our, we've gotten our front headlight connected there, now we're going to do our ditch lights, which will be auxiliary 1 and 2. As you can see, just do a little solder on the end of each wire. When you're doing single wires, they're very easy to get that, burn that insulation off. That's another reason I really like this these LEDs with the blue wire and the red type wire. The insulation burns off very, very easy, and they're very easy to work with. Again, you run into issues sometimes with the color of them being kind of wonky, but I'd rather have that and have some stuff that's easy to work with than be fighting trying to strip the insulation off of something. So we're right now we're doing our rear light, because again, guys, you kind of want to have a bit of an order here. So we did our front light and our ditch lights. Now we're going to do our rear light. And next up here, we should be doing our number boards. I always do my number boards as auxiliary 3, and then my marker lights as auxiliary 4, and then anything more after that, like step lights, ground lights, it would go on from there and so forth. But for the majority of builds like this, I'll do just the number boards will be auxiliary 3, and the marker lights will be auxiliary 4. Now the thing is, here you got to take your front and rear number board wires and solder them all together. And really the key to this, you want to take all your wires together and hold them, cut them, and then solder that all together, and just keep heating up the end of that, so that way you don't have to worry about issues with your wires not making good contact. So as you guys can tell, I'm kind of leaving all those red wires disconnected for the time being. Those will all get soldered together and connected to the U+ pads on the board. I'm not a technical guy, so I just know those all go to the U+. I normally will split them up to the ones that go to the front on one spot and the ones that go to the rear on another. So as you guys can tell, I'm going to start kind of picking through these here, trying to find all the the rear red ones here. We're going to take them, we're going to put them all together. All right, cut them, boom. Now I'm going to take them, I'm going to hold them all, kind of give them a little twisty, and kind of start soldering them a little bit here. When you get a little heat on there, it melts that insulation. It really helps hold them together well. So when in doubt, throw a little heat at it, and then again, just take your time and keep burning the ends of those. Obviously, this is sped up quite a bit, but I think you guys kind of get the idea. You got to just take and hold all that stuff together and heat it up really well. The more thorough you are at this point, the less chance you have of having trouble when you go to test everything. So just getting a good bit of heat on there, get all that insulation off, and then throw a little solder at it, hook it to the board, and boom, we're gold. So now we gotta do the fun part of trying to stuff it back in the shell, but since all of our wiring is very neat, we don't have much to worry about there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start off by putting our 2 screws back in that hold the body to the shell before we do our couplers or anything. You got that with the one in the front and the one in the rear. And then you guys will see I kind of made a dum-dum here shortly. I forgot to put the fuel tank on, so I got to do the fun part of trying to fish that back on there. Of course, you know, that's just kind of the way she goes. You forget to do that stuff. And you can see I'm putting a screw in look very difficult there. Getting in a fight because my tweezers are magnetic, and that screw liked that apparently. So now we're going to see the dum-dum here. There's our fuel tank that I should have put on before, because it's got all that end detail. I got to try and fish it around there, and just stuff that makes you crazy. So I'm trying not to break any of that stuff off, but it's all hitting on everything, and you know, that's kind of the way she goes. Just try to get it in there without breaking anything if you can, and you know, worst case, like I said before, that's what they make glue for when you break things off. That's just, you know, part of the game. I'm not going to start freaking out and panicking if the underside of my fuel tank's missing a piece or something, because nobody's going to see that anyway. So once we get the fuel tank finally wiggling in there, you can see, throw that screw in there, get around there good and tight like. Oh, we got the KD 158s. I use these on everything, on freight cars, locomotives, all that. You know, just got to put them in there. I like them just because they have that more of a good, they have a more prototypical look to them. As you can see, I ran into a bit of trouble here. That front coupler box was catching on the very front end of where it kind of mounts on the body, on the frame there. So as you guys can see, I kind of took the file to it a little bit. What I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to get that little bit of that edge off the front of that. It's not like it's super off. It's just enough that the area is so tight that I just couldn't get the coupler box to fit through there. So don't be afraid to break out the old file. See, on the rear there, it just goes right on in, of course, because way she goes. Now you can see we got our canopy glue back out. I got to glue a fan lid back on that, of course, I broke off because, like I said before, things break off, kind of way it is. So I'll throw a little bit of that on there. We got to go ahead and we got to get our little antenna back up there on top of the cab as well. Throw a little glue on the bottom of that guy. And we will put a lift ring that, of course, went MIA at some point, I believe, here. Go ahead and get that guy on there. And we got to re-drill them a little bit. Or maybe this one didn't have the lift rings. Oh. See, that's the fun of... I did this build a while back, and I didn't quite remember. I can't remember whether this had lift rings or not. I think it did. It might just be missing a few. If I remember right, this shell I got on eBay is like a Athearn demo or something. One of the factory samples. I just got the shell, and I actually ended up getting a motor and drive to put under as well. I can see we're putting that drop step back on down there at the bottom of the screen that also got broken off at some point. And I was going to use some of the canopy glue, but instead I'm going with some plasti welder there. Alright, so now we got to get out our Anita's craft acrylic. There you can see the black's the color. We got to go ahead and do some touch-up painting here. We got to go ahead and paint the brake piping we put on the trucks earlier here before we start our weathering. Now, that Anita's craft acrylic, I don't have a real reason for using that other than I've had that bottle since 2018 or so. When I first got into the hobby again, I picked that up to do, start doing builds and all that stuff, and I'm still using that same bottle. I think it's like halfway full at this point still, so if you guys need some craft acrylic and you want a giant bottle that'll probably last you 10-15 years, get yourself some of that Anita's stuff. Works pretty good. Now we gotta go ahead and we gotta paint up our ditch light housings here very, very carefully so that we don't cover the whole thing in paint. You guys can kind of tell. Kind of paint one side and then you turn the model and you paint the other side. Nothing too wild. I know some folks like to paint their detail parts separate and then put them on. I just paint them on there because the way I am, I tend to run into trouble with knocking the paint off of things. Here we are putting a little paint on our couplers because we can't have that not have paint on them. And I also like to have everything kind of painted first before I do my airbrushing, which we're about to start now. Here we have some rail brown from Badger Model Flex here we're going to be using. And we're going to kind of be taking it kind of easy here on this model. We're not going to get too carried away with our weathering. These units generally stayed pretty clean here in the late 90s. Now you guys are about to see here, old Steve's airbrush is kind of on its last leg in this video. Just really not wanting to put down the good color here. It's going to be kind of hard to see, but you guys see I'm kind of giving a little bit on the trucks. I threw a little bit on the fuel tank there, a little bit on like the bottom edges of the plow. Not going to get too carried away with the rail brown. I just want to get a good bit of dirt on there, but just kind of spritz it on the lower side of the unit. We're not going to get too carried away here. I also ended up putting some black on the top of it, but that footage also got lost. I don't know what it is with this build, but there was a lot of footage that was lost for some reason. Now here you can see I got my panel line wash from MIG, and all I do with this stuff is I dip my brush in the enamel thinner, and then I put my brush in the MIG and then put it on there. Because if you use the MIG straight out of the bottle, it is way too much. So I like to thin it down a little bit just to kind of keep that panel line nice and light. Now here you can see we're using some more Badger Model Flex paint. This is some flat black here. This is actually airbrush paint. I know I've mentioned this in other videos. I like this airbrush paint for doing these grills because it's very thin and it spreads very nicely. And when you're doing grills and stuff like this, it's really hard to get the paint to go down into all the little nooks and crannies of the grill detail. And this airbrush paint really seems to be the ticket as far as getting down in there really well and not making a mess. And not leaving you where the more thick acrylic paints will dry and they'll shrink a little bit, and then you'll see spots where the paint didn't get into. So I have not had that problem since I started using this airbrush paint, so I've kind of been going with that pretty good. Now guys, this is one of those things where just take your time. Use a fine point brush and take your time. This is sped up 3 times according to the computer right now, so I'm obviously going a lot slower than what it looks like in real world. But take your time, paint those grills. You add that dirt, that black dirtiness to those grills, it'll really kind of give you that more used unit feel, even though it's still kind of clean looking. Now we have these pens here. These, I think they're Archiver ink or something like that. These are like a brown, like a dirt brown. And the cool thing about these is what you do is you make little marks on there, like little rust spots, and then you can take a Q-tip and wipe them, and it'll make like a little rust streak. And then you come back and then just draw on your actual rust with the pen. Now here, I'm not really necessarily going off of any specific prototype photo. I'm just kind of going off of, memory of most of the units kind of got a little bit of rust around certain box doors and stuff by the cab. And you get a little bit of rust kind of coming out of little spots on the trucks and stuff. Just kind of putting in some more accent kind of weathering. I'm not really trying to get detailed and crazy with this. I just want to add just a little bit, just to give it a little life. Now here you can see I'm trying to do some kind of like streaking marks down the side of the fuel tank, like it's gotten swiped up against here. And you guys will see here in a minute why that's kind of irrelevant, because there I am with the acrylic thinner, because I was kind of annoyed at how that looked with the airbrush, how much the airbrush kind of did that like spritzing kind of thing. It didn't look good, so I ended up taking the acrylic thinner, and I'm wiping it off with Q-tip, as you guys can see. And I actually kind of liked how that ended up looking way better, honestly, just with that like clean center fuel tank with the rail, dirt, and rust on the ends of the fuel tank. I think it actually looked kind of sharp when it was all said and done. So here you can see we're just kind of zinging all that off of there. Looks like we need a little more thinner there, and just keep on keeping on with that. Just continuously getting all that stuff off. And then that'll kind of give us a base to do some more weathering there on the fuel tank, a little bit different style. Now you can see I broke that little piece off. Got to glue that back on first though, because it wouldn't be a CR Steve video if I didn't break a bunch of stuff off. So here I am coming in again with some of these archiver ink markers, and again you guys can see I'm kind of making lines here on the fuel tank, and then I'm kind of streaking them down off with the Q-tip. And again, I'm just trying to get more of a look like something rubbed up against the tank. It's not supposed to stand out and scream it. It's just supposed to give you just a little bit of that feel. Now I've got my white marker out here, and I'm going through and I'm just kind of putting a little detail marks on some of the little bolt heads and stuff, make it look like maybe they got in there and put some new bolts in some places and replace some things. And then here you see me going once again with the fuel tank, because I can't leave that alone. And I kind of liked how the white did here. It kind of gave me a little more what I was looking for, where if you get in the light right, you kind of see where it looks like something was dragging down the side of the tank and something kind of rubbed up against that. That was what I was really going for there. And of course, just coming in with some more brown here on the truck frames, just kind of throwing in just a little pizzazz here and there. Nothing too important. And coming in with a little bit of black here in the centers of the bearings and stuff, and a little bit on some of the brake cylinders, and just kind of making little marks here and there. Here you guys can see me doing the same deal on the other side here, just coming in and just giving a little life here and there. So our weathering's all done. Went ahead and put another coat of clear on there. Now we gotta go ahead and install our cab doors here. These are from KV Models. As you can see, I painted them with some scale coat Conrail blue. Now these KV doors are awesome, guys. What you see me doing here is I'm drilling out the holes for the door handle, because it's a separate piece, as well as the actual wiper blades, which I mentioned earlier that when I was trying to get the cab apart, these come with their own wiper blades, so you don't have to worry about saving the ones from the original locomotive when you are working out, when you're cutting out that door. So we drill out the holes for those. I usually like to drill them out. I pre-drill them before I paint the door, and then I come back and just I drill it out again after the paint. And you just dip a little, you just dip the end of that wiper blade and some of that canopy glue and stuck it on there, and then let's do the same thing with the door handles. The door handles can be a little bit tricky because they're so small. They're very difficult to see. As you guys see, I tried holding it up there, but it got all blurry. But just very carefully put those on. There we go. And now we got door handles on our doors. So those KV doors, again, shout out to KV Models. Those are awesome. So now what I gotta do is I have to make my rear number boards. Actually make the actual number board itself. And what I'm using here is some sheet styrene that's clear. I actually have a little piece of it I keep on the workbench, cut out of a big piece. And I wish I could tell you guys there was some kind of trick to doing this, but it's literally just taking a piece and just cutting it and cutting it and cutting it till it fits and sits in that spot back there for the number board that we cut out earlier. So basically this will cover up that hole. And again, you don't have to have it perfect, but you do want to have it fit pretty well. As you guys can see, there it goes. You just want to have it sitting in there. It can be a bit of a booger to get that thing to sit in there, but kind of what you got to do if you want to have the lit number boards and be cool. It can be a bit of a fight, but it's worth it in the end. And the other thing to remember too is even if it's not 100% perfect, you will be putting a number board decal over the top of that, so you don't have to get like too carried away. Just get it to sit in there pretty good. So there you guys can see, got that guy just popped right in there way good. And now we got those in. Our doors are dried up. Right now we're cutting our windows for the doors here. Again, using that same clear styrene that we used for the number boards, we're just cutting smaller pieces out here. Now, one thing I kind of noticed, one thing I kind of thought of here, as you guys can see, I've got my black archival ink pen out again, pen marker, whatever you want to call it here. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of taking it and I'm drawing along the edges of the door here, as well as the edges of the inside of the window. And I'm using it to kind of make it look like there's a gasket around the door to help the door seal better. You kind of started to see that a lot in the late 90s around the cab doors on these quality units where Conrail was putting that thick weather stripping or gasket or whatever. And of course, now we got to go ahead and put our windows on. Got a little canopy glue on there. As you can see, I got a lot on that one door, but that's fine because that stuff dries clean. You won't see it anyway. So go ahead and get that guy on there, and then we'll have to wait for that to dry. Now, while we're waiting for that to dry, we'll go ahead and we'll put our wind deflectors on the cab here. And we'll also go ahead and, actually, we're not doing the wind deflectors. We're doing our ditch light lenses. Those are little plastic lenses that'll come with your ditch lights from Details West. There's usually like a little thing that'll have 4 of them on there. And what I like to do is I'll use 2 for the ditch lights, and then I'll use the other 2 for the headlights because they actually fit really well in the headlight housing. So just be careful and don't lose those if you can. And I just use canopy glue to glue those lenses in place. Now for our marker lights, here you guys are going to see a little trick I've been doing for a long time now. You got the end of a fiber optic cord is what it's called. And what you do is you heat it up with a lighter. You just barely touch that to the flame of the lighter, and it'll pretty much make a little lens on the end there. And as you guys can see, we're going to we're making those here. You just take and you heat up the end of that cord, and it'll give you your little lens. You cut that off, you can glue it into place. And the nice thing about this fiber optic cord is it was very cheap. The last time I bought this stuff, it's been probably 6 or 7 years since I bought the stuff even. And I probably got enough to last me the rest of my life right now. But the nice thing is if you goof up, I mean, you only lose like, a centimeter of the stuff, not even. So if you goof it up and you're not happy with how your lens looks, you can just cut it off and throw it out and try again. And again, you only really need to touch that flame just barely. You could just, as soon as that heat gets to that lens, it rounds it off quick. So, but again, we're doing that now for our rear lights, and we'll also do that for our rear marker lights as well. So, pretty typical stuff. Any of you guys have seen my other videos know this is how I do my light lenses. I don't use any fancy pants stuff from anywhere. I don't spend money on light lenses. I just make them myself for cheap. So there's that. Now it looks like we're going to go ahead and we're going to get our little dude in the cab here. As you guys can tell, we're going to try and fit him in here. And this one's one of the little guys from Kato. I picked up a bunch of those, or Kato, depending on which way you want to say it. And that fella ain't going to fit in there, so we're going to use one of the ones we have from an Atlas model laying around. See, I got to remove Buddy's seat here because it's going to be in the way. But what we're going to do here is we're going to end up putting Buddy in there, but my better judgment got me here. And I said, it'd probably be smarter to put our wind deflector on first. So again, you can see me in my favorite red paint there. And I'm going to go ahead and make my little marks here for my wind deflector, or rear view mirror, whatever way you want to go with. And you see, we'll drill out our 2 holes, and we'll have that ready to go. If I would have put the cab figure in there first, I probably would have knocked him off of there trying to drill out these holes. So it's probably a good thing I made that big brain move there and realized that I should drill those holes out first. So you can see I put a little bit of that canopy glue there on the windowsill, so that our engineer buddy there will kind of sit on the side of it, kind of hanging out, looking out there. And we put our wind deflector on there. As you can see, kind of got to adjust your dude there. I really kind of wanted him hanging out of this one just because I like to kind of do these a little bit different with everyone and kind of have the guys kind of look in different ways and stuff. And there it is. There you guys can see that deal I knocked off there earlier with the battery boxes and all that, that came back loose, came back to bite me. I know I mentioned that earlier, that was going to come back on us, and there it is. So now we got to go ahead and we got to get our front number boards back on, because we never did put those back in place. So what we'll go ahead and do here is we'll get just a touch of canopy glue on each end, get it started, and then we'll use our knife to kind of hold it in place. Now, as you guys can tell, that box cover is really annoying me here. So as soon as I get this other number board on, what we're going to do is we're going to end up setting this off to the side, and we'll put the bottle from the canopy glue up against it to hold it in place until it dries all the way. Put a little glue on each side and send her home. There she is. Alright, so you can see I'm just going to keep fiddling with this because it's going to make me crazy. Obviously, it's going to take a little while to dry. Now you can see me kind of just take that guy, put him back there. And we'll just put that back against there and let that sit until that dries all the way, and I'll go work on something else. So once that's dried up good, now we got to install our cab doors. Again, we're going to be using some canopy glue here. And really no real tricks here other than when I install these doors, what I like to do is I like to get a little bit of canopy glue on the bottom and then on the hinges. And the reason I like to get it on the bottom is just to kind of help hold it in place a little bit better. As you can see, just kind of set it in place there. And we'll do the same here. This rear door can be a little tricky here behind the engineer because you don't have anything to hold it up on the bottom other than that little step deal behind the cab there. So just got to kind of fiddle with it and just keep fiddling with it. That glue will kind of start to stiffen up a little bit and help hold it in place. But boom, there it is. So that's going to do it here for our SD45-2 build, guys. I want to thank all of you for watching. I hope you guys learned something. If you guys have any questions, leave them down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. But you know, this was a build that I was really, really excited with how it turned out, and I was so happy with how I turned it out. I actually ended up doing a second one. So, as always, guys, I want to thank all of you for watching, subscribing, liking, comment, the whole jazz, and I will see you in the next build video.